This is the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to the 12 disciples, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward." The Gospel of the Lord. Ever since I was in college, I got bit by the traveling bug, I guess you could say. I took a couple of classes that let me travel overseas for a week or two, and there was something about that experience that just stuck with me and made me want to continue to go out and see new places and explore new countries and just new places to be, new ways of looking at the world. I was fortunate enough that in seminary and in my first couple of calls, I was able to do some traveling. I got to travel to the Holy Land and to the Middle East, and I got to visit siblings and friends and other countries all over the world. And it was always such an amazing experience, and it changed the way I saw the world every single time I came back home. Now, it may not be incredibly obvious from just listening to the story, but for the last 3 weeks, our gospel story has been Jesus talking to his disciples and giving them advice and instructions for being sent out. Jesus was preparing his disciples to go out into the world to places they had never been before, traveling and discovering new people and new places and new ways of seeing the world. And Jesus is giving them all the advice he can. He's preparing them for this new experience that's going to change their life and eventually change the whole world. Now, if you listened to the gospel 2 weeks and last week, you would know that the things that Jesus was saying to them weren't very easy to hear. Jesus was telling them that what lies in front of them, the task ahead, is going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. There's going to be times where there's conflict. And if you listen to Pastor Leland or Pastor Heidi's sermon, you know that it's not easy to preach on that. But there's some truth there. You see, traveling and journeying and going to new places is hard. It is a challenge. Every time I go and travel, I'm always surprised, and I remember again all of the ways that when I'm home, I have that local knowledge that helps me. When you're traveling, simple things like figuring out how to get to your next meeting or to your next hotel can be tricky. Maneuvering new cities and new streets and finding your way around. It can be hard just to know where to get a good bite to eat. All of these things that when we're at home, when we're in our hometowns, are simple and we know how to do, become more challenging when we're traveling, when we're a stranger. And yet here we have in this third week of Jesus' advice for traveling, Jesus' instructions to his disciples, Jesus picks up on what I think is the most important point. The most important, the most powerful thing that happens to us when we go somewhere else, when we experience a new culture, when we find ourselves as the stranger. Yes, many times it can be hard, but sometimes in those moments, we discover this welcome. The welcome that comes from a stranger opening their doors, pointing us in the right direction, pulling us into the back room and having us sit down for a cup of tea or, yes, that cool glass of water. Again and again, when I've gone on my travels, what sticks with me aren't the moments that I got lost and had nowhere to go and was feeling kind of hopeless, but it were those moments where a complete stranger points me in the right direction. Those moments when you meet someone new and you start this improbable relationship where someone is investing in you and caring about you, and all you have to do is receive it. It's moments like that, moments on our own life's journey that change us, that help us not just experience a new place, but to fall in love with a new people and a new culture. This is what Jesus is preparing his disciples for as they go out into the world. Now, I would imagine not many of us at the moment are planning a lot of big trips to go and see the world right now. Or at least if you were, many of those trips have been delayed or even canceled. But I think, in at least one way, every single one of us is on a journey to a new place at this moment. It's not much of a stretch to say that we are living in a different world today than we were just 4 or 5 months ago. We're living in a new world in which we don't know all of the rules yet. We're not quite sure how to get from point A to point B. We don't know exactly where to go to get a good sandwich for lunch. We're not sure what the local customs are yet for greeting one another or for gathering together. This is a new world that we're living in. And it's not just because of COVID-19, but if you look at what's happening in our world where millions of people are standing up and they're protesting and they're praying and they're marching for peace and tackling our own nation's original sin of racism. There are big changes happening in the world today. And if that weren't enough, we are on the edge of a national election that is very likely to be the most divisive and perhaps the most consequential election in our country's recent history. So much is changing in this world. Every time we step outside of our doors, it can feel like we are a stranger in an unknown land. It can feel like we are lost in a place that, even though we've grown up here our whole lives, we don't know anymore. And this is hard. It's hard to be God's people in this time when we can't gather together to worship in our sanctuary. It's hard to be God's people in a time when difficult conversations are arising up and we don't have the answers. It can be hard to be God's people in a time when we're becoming more and more polarized, more and more divided, and it seems like more and more is at stake. This is a challenging place to be. And yet Jesus' words to us today, they remind us of something. They remind us that when we are in an unknown place, when we are traveling, when we are on a journey and we don't know where we are, again and again, what happens is from a person or place we never expected, we receive a welcome, a kind smile, a point in the right direction, an offer to step back into someone's home, to share a cup of tea or a cool glass of water. And those moments, however small they might seem, however insignificant they may feel in just that one little piece, those moments change us. Those moments give us a new perspective on the world the way it is today. They give us a new chance to see the people around us. Like it or not, each and every one of us is on a journey right now, in this moment. We are in a new place and we are all searching and trying to discover what God is calling us to do here. It's not easy. There are plenty of ways that we can get bogged down and lost and turned around. And yet, it's in those very same moments that God comes to us. That the Holy Spirit rushes into our lives in the form of a person we never expected. And all of a sudden, it's like a cool glass of water. God rushes in and sends us back out on a new path with a new way to see the world. This is what we are called to do, people of God. We are called to be journeyers in our own world right here and right now. You know, when I was preparing for this sermon, one of the things I often do is look through kind of commentaries. Look through what other pastors and other people have said about each different lesson that we read in church. It's something a lot of pastors do when they have no idea what they're going to preach on, myself included. And I was reading through one of these commentaries, and for this lesson, this person who wrote this a few years ago said, Imagine before you preach a sermon on this lesson that all of the people in your church, all of the people that would hear this message were being sent out, and that nobody was going to show up in your church building next Sunday. Imagine they were going to go out on a journey and it would never be clear when you would be able to gather together again. That's not quite as hard to imagine as maybe the author thought it would be. But this right here, what Jesus is saying to us today, is a lesson for us who are on a journey. A lesson for us who aren't sure when or if the world is going to get back to normal. A lesson for all of us who feel like we're lost and aren't sure if we're going to make it home again. And in this lesson, Jesus says there are people out there that are ready to welcome you, that are ready with open arms to embrace you, to make the world feel just a little more normal, and to work together to be sent back out, pointed in the right direction, headed down a new path and with a new way to see and understand the world around us. This is what God is calling us to do today. In this new and strange place, to be loved and to be cared for by the people we never expect, and to be sent out to love and serve the world. It's not easy. It can be exhausting. We can feel like we're stuck in a rut or stuck in a line at O'Hare Airport for ages and ages. And yet, in the midst of this traveling we're doing together, we see God at work, and our lives are changed again and again. Amen.